All other Athenians had abandoned their city without a fight, and were now on the island of Salamis, or at Troezen in the Peloponnesus. So, now they meet on the island of Salamis to decide what are they going to do. Quote, some of the Greek admirals wished to withdraw to the Isthmus of Corinth and anchor off the wall which had been constructed by the Peloponnesians. Themistocles argued forcefully that the only Greek hope lay in sticking to the main line of strategy of naval action, and in response to a taunt that he no longer had a country or a right to speak, he said, your city's been taken. Shut up. You don't have anything to say. He threatened to sail off with the Athenian ships and citizens to found a new state in the western Mediterranean. Oh, I don't have a say? Well, maybe we'll just take off then. Since all realized the Greeks had no chance without the strong Athenian navy, they yielded once more to his keen analysis and agreed to hold their position. So, both sides remained indecisive, for Xerxes could not decide whether to advance by land on the Isthmus of Corinth, or to deal with the Greek naval force off of his flank. Now, Themistocles was determined that they should fight at Salamis. He wanted to fight a sea battle in the narrow straits, quote, and the main coast of Attica. But, dismayed by Persian success on land, his allies would gladly have dispersed, each to defend his own territories. That's where they were saying, you don't have a right, we're going to do what we want. The Greek leaders disputed bitterly among themselves, and tempers were lost. Now, finally, they get it settled. They're going to go to Salamis, right? They're all agreed on this, but Themistocles doesn't trust his partners. Themistocles mistrusted his allies and secretly planted an informer on the Persians with the intelligence that the Greek ships intended to make their escape from Salamis before it was too late. So he sent someone to Xerxes and said, all the Greek ships are at Salamis, you've got to hurry and get there, they are planning to get away. Xerxes promptly dispatched a naval force to block all exit from the straits. Dispersal was no longer possible, and the Greek fleet in its entirety was obliged to fight where Themistocles wished it to make it stand. That bit from Warfare in the Classical World. So we rejoin Star now, and get just a little bit again. Xerxes, a young king desiring glory, psychologizing, fell into the trap and ordered his fleet to advance for the final blow. To make victory doubly sure, he sent a detachment round to the west end of Salamis to bottle up the Greeks. He himself sat upon a throne on a hill overlooking the battleground, so that he could award prizes to the most valorous of his subjects. The battleground, it's the sea battle. On a morning in late September, the Persian fleet of some 350 ships rode in line abreast from its anchorage at Phalerum towards Salamis. The Greeks, who had about 300 ships in the action, knew that they were encircled from the rear and prepared for the decisive battle. Athenian hoplites were embarked on the ships. As the Persians closed in, their line was split by the island of Psytalia, P-S-Y-T-T-A-L-I-A, on which they had stationed troops. The confusion that resulted was heightened by the apparent retreat of the Greeks, who backed water on seeing the Persians enter the narrow reaches of the bay. But this tactical maneuver was designed only to suck the enemy farther in. Suddenly, the Greeks rode forward from front and flanks and threw themselves into hand-to-hand battle with the Persians, who had no chance to use maneuvering tactics. By the close of the day, the despondent Xerxes could see his remaining ships streaming away in utter defeat. Some 200 Persian warships, mostly of the Phoenician contingent, were lost, as against only about 40 Greek ships. And Aristides, who had been recalled from exile, had led a crossing to Pistalia, which wiped out the Persian forces there, that little island. Immediately, the Greek victory was due to the military skill and determination of the men who fought in the battle. But behind this factor lay the logical persuasiveness of Themistocles, the doggedness of the Athenians, and the calm, generally accepted leadership which the Spartans had provided. Alright, that's what Starr gives us. Now we come to Hellenic history, Botsford and Robinson, and they quote at length from Herodotus, and everybody gets their information from Herodotus. So now let's have Herodotus' input on it. Quote, "Then the Persian captains, believing all that the messenger had said, proceeded to land a large body of Persian troops on the islet of Psytalia, which lies between Salamis and the mainland." This is just after he's been fooled into taking the bait, going to the battle. "After which, about the hour of midnight, they advanced their western wing towards Salamis, so as to enclose the Greeks. At the same time, the force stationed about Ceos, Chios, and Cynosura moved forward and filled the whole strait as far as Munichia with their ships, Munychia. This advance was made to prevent the Greeks from escaping by flight, and to block them up in Salamis, where it was thought the vengeance might be taken upon them for the battles fought near Artemisium." The Persians are going to get their revenge yet. The Persian troops were landed on the islet of Psytalia, because as soon as the battle began, the men and wrecks were likely to be drifted thither, as the isle lay in the very path of the coming fight, and they would thus be able to save their own men and destroy those of the enemy. All these movements were made in silence, that the Greeks might have no knowledge of them, and they occupied the whole night, so that the men had no time to get their sleep. The Greeks now made ready for the coming fight. At the dawn of day, all the men-at-arms were assembled together. Speeches were made to them, of which the best was that of Themistocles, who throughout contrasted what was noble with what was base, and bade them, in all that came within the range of man's nature and constitution, always to make choice of the nobler part. Having thus wound up his discourse, he told them to go at once on board their ships, which they accordingly did. The fleet had scarce left the island when they were attacked by the barbarians. At once most of the Greeks began to backwater, and were about touching the shore, when Aminias of Pallene, one of the Athenian captains, darted forth in front of the line, and charged a ship of the enemy. The two vessels became entangled, and could not separate, whereupon the rest of the fleet came up to help Aminias, and engaged with the Persians. Such is the account which the Athenians give of the way in which the battle began. But the Aeginetians maintain that the vessel which rushed forward was this different one. It also reported that a phantom in the form of a woman appeared to the Greeks, and in a voice that was heard from end to end of the fleet, cheered them on in the fight. First, however, rebuking them and saying, "Strange men, how long are you going to backwater?" So was that just a tactic, or were they scared as hell? Against the Athenians, who held the western extremity of the line toward Eleusis, were placed the Phoenicians. Against the Lacedaemonians, whose station was eastward towards the Piraeus, the Ionians. Of these last, a few only followed the advice of Themistocles to fight backwardly. The greater number did far otherwise. I could mention here the names of many captains who took vessels from the Greeks, but I shall pass over all excepting Theomestor, the son of Androdamedas, and Phylacus, the son of Hystaius, both Simians. I show this preference to them, inasmuch as for this service Theomestor was made tyrant of Samos by the Persians, while Phylacus was enrolled among the king's benefactors, and presented with a large estate inland. In the Persian tongue, the king's benefactors are called Orosangs. Far the greater number of the Persian ships engaged in this battle were disabled, either by the Athenians or by the Aeginetians. For as the Greeks fought in order and kept their line, while the barbarians were in confusion and had no plan in anything that they did, the issue of the battle could scarce be other than it was. Yet the Persians fought far more bravely here than at Euboea, and indeed surpassed themselves. Each did his utmost, through fear of Xerxes, for each thought that the king's eye was upon himself, because the king's throne was there on the hill. A vast number of Persians died, he says. Of the Greeks there died only a few, for as they were able to swim, all those that were not slain outright by the enemy escaped from the sinking vessels and swam across to Salamis. But on the side of the barbarians more perished by drowning than in any other way, since they did not know how to swim. The great destruction took place when the ships which had been first engaged began to fly. For they who were stationed in the rear, anxious to display their valor before the eyes of the king, made every effort to force their way to the front,